How a Romance Novel Saved the Galaxy by Ariana Deralte. Chapter 24. Holdan! Once they were back on the main ship, Holdan showed Obi-Wan the room he'd be staying in. Faye was assigned a room as well, but opted to join Obi-Ka in his for some meditation. Holdan made his way to the room he was assigned, just down the corridor. He shucked off his armor, since it was dirty from the fight on the mining platform, and found a generic bodysuit for himself to change into. Then he headed to find a seat in the rec room, where he could just make out the exit to Obi-Ka's door. He was surprised when Faye came out of Obi-Ka's room an hour later and gently took Holdan's hand. She looked up at him and simply said, "Ask him again." It seemed like only a second before Holdan was hitting the door chime and responding to the soft "Enter" from Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan was sitting on the edge of his bunk, looking tiny and bundled up in the adult clothes Holdan had found him earlier that day. More importantly, Holdan saw a flash of hope on Obi-Ka's face when he saw Holdan, even if he looked away as if ashamed at the emotion a second later. The room wasn't big. Holdan flipped out the flat seat that was usually locked flat to the wall opposite the bunk. "Master Faye and I were meditating. Her connection to the Force is just amazing. She just checks in with it all the time and follows its will. I need to be more like that. To be still and listen." "Like how?" asked Holdan, a little amused at the nervous babble. Dragons, Hutts, Jin, and Xanatos Obi-Wan took in stride. But this conversation had him unsettled. Strangely, it calmed the nerves Holdan had had when approaching Obi-Wan's door. Obi-Wan flushed a little, but nodded. "Obi-Ka, will you let me adopt you? I swear by the Kara, by the Manda, that I will do whatever it takes to help you achieve your dreams, be it as a Jedi or a Mandalorian, or just both." He punctuated the statement by thumping his fist across his chest, a salute to the brilliant ad across from him. "Are you sure?" asked Obi-Wan. "I was always in trouble at the temple, and I don't think that has changed since I left." He gestured at the bandages around his neck as if that were his fault. "And Master Faye thinks it's all going to turn out all right, but I know this is going to cause you trouble." Holdan made sure Obi-Wan's eyes were trained on his before he responded. He wanted to be very clear. "Obi-Wan Kenobi, you are not a burden or obligation I'm taking on. You are wanted." There were tears in both their eyes now. "And even if you do cause trouble, you are worth every second of it." Obi-Wan launched himself into Holdan's arms with a faint sob. They both just gave in to the tears for a few minutes. Holdan was so thankful he was going to have the opportunity to help Obi-Wan the same way Holdan's burr had helped him. Finally he said, "Is that a yes, Obi-Ka?" He felt the nod against his chest. "Yes," said Obi-Wan, looking up. "Ni kirtal kai sad, Obi-Wan Kenobi. That means you are my aunt now, Obi-Ka." "What do I call you now?" "You can call me Bor. That's parent in Mandoa. But Holdan or Holbur are fine as well if you want to use my name." Obi-Wan nodded. "Bor," he said, testing out the word. Holdan couldn't stop his smile. Holdan had exited Obi-Wan's room, intent on getting his some food, to a massive hearty congratulations from what felt like every man on the ship. He turned down the drinks they pressed on him to return with food for Obi-Wan, but found the exhausted kid asleep. Holdan made sure he was under the blanket and that the lights were off before exiting, unable to keep a smile off his face. He was a boy! The food went back to the mess. Only then did Holdan feel free to accept some of the congratulatory drinks. He should have headed to sleep then, but he was content to sit at one of the benches in the mess and listen to his Bode tell stories about their own Ade and adoptions. He was not sure when Faye appeared by his side again, her cheeks flushed with alcohol. "Some of them are very jealous," she leaned in to whisper in his ear. Holdan had no doubt about that. "Obi-Ka is amazing, that's why," he told her. She laughed. "He is. He's got a very strong Force presence for someone his age." She sobered a little. "I should tell you as his parent that he bonds very easily in the Force." Holdan ushered her to the other side of the room, away from the current storyteller. "What does that mean?" he asked once they were in a quieter area. Jedi tend to form mental bonds with others, usually other Force sensitives around them. This is encouraged within reason, though as Jedi, we must also be ready to lose those bonds. She was drunkenly punctuating everything she said with flailing hand gestures. It was very cute. Obi-Wan forms bonds easily, so his mind's been floundering without the support from the bonds he has with his friends at the temple. He's been unconsciously attempting to latch onto any Force sensitive he meets.
So what, he's bonding with that Chibur Jin?
Hissed Holdan. That was 100% not happening. Oh no, but he was halfway there before our meditation. I've disentangled them, so to speak, and put in a temporary bond of our own to keep him stable.
Temporary? Asked Holdan, unable to keep the dismay out of his voice. He'd been hoping she'd be Obi-Wan's master. No doubt Obi-Wan hoped the same. She frowned and opened her mouth to speak before closing it again. Instead, she shut her eyes and just sat there for a minute. When she opened them, her gaze was clear and steady. She must have caught a confusion. I was clearing the alcohol from my system, she explained. Why don't we go to one of our quarters? Holdan's room was slightly closer. They both sat next to each other on the bunk.
The Force tells me I'm not meant to be Obi-Wan's master, said Faye bluntly. In some ways, I wish I was. Each Padawan I've trained has brought me great joy, even as I braced myself for the sorrow of losing them. It's been a few hundred years since the last one. I miss it.
A few hundred years?
Echoed Holdan. She looked like she was in her 20s for a human. She brushed one hand along a pointed ear. A combination of genetics and the Force. I was born before the Mandalorian Jedi Wars, actually. It wasn't like long-lived species were unheard of in the galaxy, but the majority tended to not look very human.
That must be difficult,
said Holdan. He couldn't imagine constantly outliving his Ade over and over again. She took his hand. It is, but the Force keeps me busy. I don't think I've been this close to even the Mid-Rim in centuries.
Do the Jedi even know you're alive?
He asked. She laughed. They do. I run into other Jedi sometimes, or they track me down when they need something. In fact, there's a number of Jedi who got fed up with the rules of either the Council or the Senate, and are just wandering the Outer Rim, following the will of the Force. Holdan was pretty sure those were the ones who often showed up in reports from his fellow Mandalorians.
Can one of them fly?
Most of us Outer Rim Jedi can, to be honest, but I know who you mean since he's particularly good at it. John Antilles. It was also the most common name in the galaxy. Holdan had assumed it was a placeholder for the Jedi's actual name, but maybe it really was the poor Jedi's name.
Obi-Wan will still need help until I can find him a master,
he said.
You can teach him the basics, at least.
She squeezed his hand in reassurance. Yes, I can certainly help him with the mental arts while I'm on Mandalore. I'm afraid I haven't held a lightsaber in several centuries, so I can't help him with that. I suspect that's another reason the Force says he's meant for another. Obi-Wan is destined to be a great Jedi warrior. Holdan figured even the Jedi and the Kara could see Obi-Wan's Mandakila.
He's an amazing fighter already.
He bragged. By his understanding, a Jedi going around without a lightsaber was the equivalent of a Mandalorian going without their armor. It must be a subject of great pain, so he'd avoid asking her about it. Looking down, he realized she still held his hand. He squeezed it reassuringly. She gave him a small, grateful smile. You know, the other Mandalorians were also very jealous when I left them mess with you, said Faye.
They probably think we've come here to Kark,
explained Holdan, a little embarrassed by his bone. The thought hadn't crossed his mind since his mistake with Jin. He'd be happy to call Faye a friend and leave it at that. The Jedi had other ideas. Why don't we make that jealousy a reality then? She asked. She tugged his hand toward her. Holdan went.